Hi, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining me for another Extraordinary Stories small episode. In this episode, I will be telling you two different short stories. Before I begin, can I just say a quick shout out to Senga Robertson for her lovely review on my Facebook page and for her support in general. It was really nice to hear from you this week. Thanks to all of the social media followers and anyone who is retweeting and liking the stuff on Instagram. Thanks very much. It's nice to know that people are out there and are listening and are letting other people know about the podcast. Okay, the theme for Small Stories this episode is recorded deaths. Deaths which have been either witnessed, captured, or are able to be revisited by the general public. There's so many more of these than you would actually think that there are. I wasn't really sure. I knew of one case. It's the very first story that I'll tell here. This was the one that I thought, okay, that's really interesting because that death was recorded. And then when I started to research it, I begun to realise actually there's so many cases where a person has died, been killed, and actually it's been captured either in audio or video or in a photograph or whatever. So yeah, so that's going to be the theme for this episode. So the one I'm going to tell you, I started to become fascinated by this case reading about it a few years ago, and I think I'm not entirely sure, but I think the podcast My Favourite Murder might have covered this one as well. I'm pretty sure a couple of podcasts will have covered this case, but it's the Australian Tinder date that went horribly wrong. Okay, story one. Warina Wright was visiting the Gold Coast in Australia when she matched on Tinder with Gable Tosti. They met in a popular tourist night spot in Surfers Paradise on a Thursday night. They bought a 6-pack of beers after they'd spent a few minutes together in the pub. By the end of the date, Warina Wright was dead, having plunged 14 stories from the balcony of Tosti's apartment. And 2 years later, he was on trial in Queensland Supreme Court, charged with her murder. So the story goes like this. They match on Tinder, they meet shortly after in a bar, and they go back to Tosti's apartment, which is on the 14th floor. So the Tinder conversations, they end up making their way into evidence. Some of the things that are said there are, she says at one point, "I'm a freak in the sheets," and this is from memory, but I think his response is something like, "I'm a porn star when I get going." So when they've met on Tinder, I think they're both very clear that they're meeting and that their meet is going to be about sex. So I've already told you that the story ends in her absolutely brutal death, but this is what makes the case so interesting for me. The whole evening is recorded. So Tosti had his phone on, recording the entire evening from the moment they get back to his apartment till the moment when she dies and the moment later when he calls his dad for help. So the recording captures their conversation as it awkwardly goes between talking about architecture, they talk about religion, they talk about the singer James Blunt, they talk about Kanye West. And there can be music playing, you can hear music playing in the background. And the talk is occasionally punctuated by Tosti's occasional cries of "ow" as Wright punches him. He tells her at one point to just chill and have a drink. He says to her, "You love beating me up like a kiwi." Wright tells him she beats people up all the time. Tosti quips that he will end up looking like a piece of tenderised meat if she keeps on hitting him. She asks him, "Can you tell my mother that I'm not a loser?" She talks about her dog that's dead, her belief in justice, and the afterlife. Tosti says, "We die. That's it. Kill me now. You could throw me off the balcony." It's the first mention of the balcony. I'll just point that out there. That is the very first mention of it that comes up. So a lot of their conversation just sounds an awful lot to me like, when you don't really know someone, you end up covering a lot of the broad conversations, don't you? Especially if you're meeting someone in those circumstances where it's going to probably lead towards sex, you've had a few drinks, so you maybe hit all the big let's talk about religion, but let's also talk about music, let's talk about architecture, let's talk about all of these things. So it sounds to me a lot like, when I heard it, it sounds like a lot of that's what their conversation was doing at that point. He says there are only 3 things that are really good on this earth: food, sleep, and sex. He says there are no gods, but I've been through some stuff. She at one point says this phrase, which is very unsettling. She says, I'm going to go vampire on your arse. I mean, what does that even mean? I'm going to go... it's so clear on the recording. She says, I'm going to go vampire on your arse. So, I guess, make of that what you will. So, you can then hear on the recording, you can hear them having sex. So, the sex is over. They both have another drink at this point. He asks her if she wants him to walk her back to his apartment. The music stops. And she starts asking where her belongings are. And Tosti offers to call her mobile phone, because it must be somewhere in his apartment. They just can't find it. But she starts to accuse Tosti of stealing her phone and her handbag, and an argument breaks out between them. She says, where's my fucking shit? I will fucking destroy your jaw. It's not fucking funny. I'm going to call the police. Tosti says, I should never have given you so much to drink. I thought we were going to have fun. I don't deserve this shit. I'm a nice fucking guy. So Tosti manages to find her phone. It is in the apartment, and a bit of calm returns. Right, then starts to talk about the fact that she's met people before and they've taken advantage of her and they've taken money from her. At one point he swings back into conversation and he says, do you even remember what you were doing to me half an hour ago? You were beating me up for no reason and you thought it was funny. Then he says to her, can we just sit down for a second and just discuss what's happened tonight? He says, I've met some really weird people off of Tinder, and I'm the most tolerant person in the world, but you've been a bit violent. She talks about wanting to take a look out of the window. She says, I'm going to head over there, and he's got these big like glass, he's got these huge big like bay windows that look out over his balcony, and he jokes, okay, don't jump off or anything. So, second mention of the balcony in this story. He then says to her, you're kind of mental, but in a really cute way. I just find that really creepy. I find that really a fucking horrible thing to say to someone. Oh, you're kind of mental, but in a really cute way. That's creepy. So, she goes to the bathroom at one point. Now, this is all obviously still on the audio recording, and he whispers into the phone, God help me, shit. So she returns from the bathroom, and Tosti says at this point that she switches from whatever kind of thing is annoying her before. She's now angry about something, and he says to her, I thought we were just playing around, but you're a psycho, a goddamn psycho. He says, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you walk out of this apartment just the way you are. You're not going to collect any of your belongings or anything. You're just going to walk out, and I'm going to slam the door on you. You understand? If you try and pull anything, I'll knock you out. I'll knock you the fuck out. I mean, it's pretty brutal, that. It's pretty fucking horrible words to say to anyone. She starts saying, I'm sorry, and he says, I don't care. Get up. So he starts, it sounds in the audio as if he's like trying to restrain her at this point, and he says to her, you don't understand, do you? He says, you think you can hit me and I'll just fall down like it's the movies? And she's shouting for him to let her go. He says, who the fuck do you think you are? And she starts saying, no, 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 over and over again. He says, you're trying to kill me. Why'd you try and hit me with that, huh? And she's screaming, no, no, no. Now, what the thing is that he's saying she tried to kill him with, I don't know. She must have maybe picked something heavy up in the apartment, or, well, I don't know. The whole thing's totally fucked, so it's really hard to tell what was actually going on. Then he says to her, this is all on recording, you know. It's all being recorded. And she starts to say, please just let me go home. He says, I would, but you've been a bad girl. So then the glass door on the balcony opens. She's screaming, no, 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 over and over again. And he sighs and less than 20 seconds pass, and then you can hear a scream as she slips from the balcony and falls to her death. So this is the moment where it's just all gone horribly, horribly wrong. Now, at this point in the podcast, I'm going to do something I've not done this before, and I listen to an awful lot of podcasts who do this, and sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But I thought for this particular story, it was probably important that I did. So I have a little bit of the recording. Now, I'm going to warn you, it is pretty horrible. You can find this on YouTube. It's been played on a million different news stations. In fact, there's an interview in Australia where he's made to sit down with an interviewer and re-listen to the whole entire recording and dissect it and talk about it. So it's not audio that I've had to work very hard to find. It's just that I think it's probably, in the context of the story, it's quite useful to hear it. But I am giving you a warning. If you wanted to do a wee 15-second skip, you could do it at this point. Okay, here is the moment where it really all goes wrong.
That's enough. That is more than enough. You've won it, you're welcome. You're not my kind of girl. That's enough. This is f***ing bullshit. You're lucky I haven't chucked you off my f***ing balcony, you goddamn psycho little bitch. I would, but you've been
Okay, so yeah, it's not nice. It's not nice listening at all. And I wasn't, it really, believe me, I'm not including it to be salacious. I'm not including it to be shock factor. For me, when I was looking at the story, this audio has always played a massive part in my forming my own opinions on the story. Just to reiterate, he actually does say the words, "You're lucky I haven't chucked you off my balcony, you goddamn psycho little bitch." Oh, fucking horrible. So what does Toasty do next? He orders a pizza. What the fuck? He actually orders a pizza. What a cunt. A girl has just died from falling off of his balcony and he orders a pizza. This is all in the recording. You can actually hear him phoning. The recording is still going. The thing inside his phone is still recording all of this. So he phones the pizza. Once he's eaten his pizza, then he calls his dad. So this is the second little bit of recording that I'm going to play you. It's just interesting to hear it's very short, the little discourse between him and his dad, and it goes like this.
We, had sex in bed, and then after that, she kept drinking, and we were both drinking, and she, I think she thought it was a joke or something, but she kept, beating me up and whatever. Yeah, and it was because she was really drunk. And I forced her out on the balcony, and I think she might have jumped off. I didn't cause this. I didn't push her or anything. I'm just walking around the area, and there's a million cops around the area. It was really f***ed up.
Yeah, okay. So that's that conversation. So now the case goes to court, and the Justice John Byrne instructs the jury after the trial has taken place, and he says they mustn't find Toasty guilty just because they think that he should have behaved differently. He says it would be wrong for you to use any of the evidence as a basis for the prosecution of murder. He says, I'm going to quote the Hollywood director Billy Wilder, "Hindsight is always 20/20. And no, it is made extremely clear to the jury that they can only find Toasty guilty of murder if they are satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that he had intention to cause her grievous bodily harm. The jury come back and he is found not guilty. So obviously this is hugely problematic for anyone who's watching this case at the moment. It's a very, very difficult one to call. It's a very difficult case to call. The thing that never gets talked about here, the thing, I don't know, it gets sort of missed a lot, is I think there's a lot to do with the type of sex that they were having. The fact that they sort of met and decided to have sex so quickly, I know that's really commonplace with things like Tinder, Grindr, all these apps. That's what, you know, a lot of these are just about hooking up for sex and whatever. But I think the thing that's missing in the angle of the sex that they were having is, to me, listening to the recording, it sounds very much like they were having S&M sex. There's a power play between them. You can hear the power shifting. There's points where she clearly thinks she's in charge. He thinks he's in charge. I don't know. There's definitely some of the stuff that she says in the audio. There's a gag in her mouth at points. I'm pretty sure he has a gag in his mouth at one point. And so I don't know whether there was a game. There was just a game of power and of play with a little bit of violence there, and it just went wrong. I don't know, it's maybe too simple to say it was sex games gone wrong, but I don't know, you perhaps under the influence of alcohol, the both of them just lost sight of what they were actually doing, and things just got a bit too serious and a bit too real. I have a hard time believing Tosti's story about it. And I know the evidence is in the fucking recording and it's there. You can hear it. I just have a hard time believing that he could have been so badly beaten by this girl that he had no option but to put her on the balcony. The fact that the balcony rears its head 3 or 4 times in their conversation is also very odd. He's almost sort of been tried by the public, Tosti, as well, although he's been found not guilty. There's so much media speculation around it. There's so many articles, interviews out there where the finger is definitely being pointed at him. In an interview with an Australian journalist, I think it's on this 60 Minutes programme, it's really interesting, they play the recording back to him. I mean, it's really creepy. He has to sit there and listen to the whole thing. And the reporter says to him, Gable, she said no 33 times. And he says, yeah, I know. I think she just wanted to make a lot of noise. The reporter says, can you see... I love this bit. The reporter says, can you see why putting her on the balcony makes you look like a cold-hearted bastard? And he takes a second to respond. And then he says, well, yeah, when you put it like that. So yeah, so that's really the end. That's really the end of the story, and really all that I know about it. It's such a weird one because it's there. It's just creepy as well that you can go onto YouTube and listen to their entire evening, completely free. You can listen to that whole entire evening. It does my head in this story because I don't really think that we have the truth yet. I don't really think we'll ever know what happened. What do you think happened? If you've got an idea, you've got a thought, got a theory, let me know. Okay, and on to story 2 in our recorded deaths episode. So the night of April 15th, 1984 was one that no comedy fan will ever forget, or anyone who happened to be watching ITV, which is a British TV channel, and watching a hugely popular show live from Her Majesty's Theatre. Sort of similar to like the Royal Variety performance or that sort of idea. Something, yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, the Royal Variety performance. It comes around every single year, and what happens is they pull together like magicians, dance acts, singers, lots and lots of the big acts that are happening in the UK and around the world actually, and they put them on, and it's a big huge live event. Lots of people come and see it, and it's usually attended by the royals, so you don't always get the Queen there. In fact, I think years ago you used to get the Queen. Then you got Prince Charles for a while, and now you get oh my god, what's the name? Kate and Wells. Totally forgot the name for a minute there. Kate and Wells, you get them for okay. So on the bill that night was magician and comic Tommy Cooper. So in a nutshell, his act was to be a bit of a shit magician. So his whole thing is that he would set up tricks and they would go wrong. Now for him, it was kind of born out of the fact that in the 1960s and 70s, he was trying to be a magician, but he wasn't a very good magician. And in turn, he would play these little clubs, but actually what would happen was when his tricks went wrong, that's when it was actually funny that he could never quite get the trick right. And then he started to sort of do some comedy along with that, and he had these like amazing kind of one-liners, and he'd hit out with stuff, and yeah, so that this was kind of his act, and he was very successful. Tommy Cooper, very, very successful. He for years he was raking in lots and lots of money from his act, and he was very, very well known. So on the night that I was talking about, April 15th, he's live on TV and he's doing his famous magic cloak skit. And what happens here is, I'm not really sure of the sexual equality at the time. I don't think it was exactly on point. I don't think it's the way it is now. He's basically standing there in his just normal magician's outfit, which was like a little red fez and a suit. And two women bring him a cloak that he puts over himself. Now, the two girls that he had at the time, because, it was the 1980s and it was the whole let's have a sexy magician's assistant type thing, not great for feminism, but that was the thing. So these two women like put the cloak on him, and he sort of gives them this funny look, and the whole joke is it's meant to be, these two women are like, dressing him, this is how sexy. And he then like falls to his knees, and it looks like it's a part of the joke. It looks like he's put the cloak on. These two women have been so sexy that he's fallen to his knees with sexiness. He then falls backwards, but then he doesn't move. So the audience at this point think that this is a part of the routine. They think that they're just watching a bit of hilarious physical comedy. But the people in the wings and the director of the TV show, they know that at this point something's wrong, because they'd seen this in rehearsals and they knew this doesn't look right. Something looks very wrong here. And actually what had happened was he'd suffered a massive heart attack at that very moment. At the very moment they put the cloak on him, that was it. Heart attack. And he died there and then. And what makes it worse is, and you can see this footage on YouTube, it's truly horrible. They have to bring in the tabs. So the tabs are those huge, big, red theatre curtains. So they have to bring those in to try and cover it, and his feet end up sticking out the front of them, which sends the audience into a frenzy. They are pissing themselves at this point because they still think this is a part of the act. They've no idea this isn't a part of the show. Now, people sitting at home, they began to get an idea that something was wrong because all of a sudden the channel cut straight to adverts. So another comedian on the bill that night said that he did look a bit frail before he went on stage, and that they'd had to knock him up a makeshift dressing room that was at the side of the stage so that he wouldn't have to go up and down any stairs. Tommy Cooper was a massive alcoholic and smoked a lot of cigarettes and had a lot of heart problems in his life. But at this point when this happened, actually his health was, I think it was better. I think he was doing an awful lot better. And there's a comedian who watched all of this backstage, and he says, I was watching on a monitor backstage and we all thought he'd just stuck another physical gag into his set. He was a real terror for introducing new bits and pieces without any warning. So now all the other performers, they have to adjust what they've been doing, and it's a live show. So they keep the show going even though he's died. So St John's ambulance arrived, but they couldn't revive him, and he was eventually declared dead upon arrival at Westminster Hospital. So then the nightly news bulletin comes in, and those who'd been in the theatre came out to find that they'd actually just witnessed Tommy Cooper dying live on stage, but they thought it was just a part of his act. What a fucking shocker that must have been. It must have been absolutely horrible. I think I was too young to really remember Tommy Cooper dying on stage, but I do kind of remember him being around TV at the time, I think. Or it might just be one of those things where actually you just see lots of clips when you're older and you think that you remembered it, one of those kind of false memory things. So two very, very different examples of deaths which have been recorded there. And I hope you enjoyed listening to those. As always, if you want to get in touch, you can. It would be lovely to hear from you on Instagram and Facebook, Extraordinary Stories Podcast, on Twitter at Extra Stories Pod, or if you want to email me, extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. Okay, thanks for listening to this Small Stories episode. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.